Okay, well, with the time left, we're going to do a panel discussion. It's going to be protective coatings for bridge preservation. And we have 5 panel members, including myself, Sarah, who was here before and was already introduced, and Paul, Rex, who just spoke, and we have Derek Castle over here. Now, Derek was introduced before in the other session. What we have here is I developed 5 questions, and we're not going to get to them all. But we're going to go through them, and we're going to be looking for some good discussion from the audience. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through these questions. I'm going to direct them to one of the panel members to kick us off. So the first panel question is, which of the following do you think are the most important factors in achieving a high-quality bridge coating application and why? Engineering evaluations, surface preparation, coating application, contract to CEI, and owner qualifications. That could be in-house as well. Hold points for critical inspection operations, specifications, better coating systems for new construction recoating projects, institutional courage, and challenge the low bid culture. So, because that's a hard thing to remember, I'm going to basically hand this to the expert selected over here, which is Mr. Derek Castle, because he hasn't had a chance to say anything yet. So, you're up first, my friend. Come on up to the podium.
2 most important factors. Probably surface preparation. Let's see, 2 most important factors: high quality bridge coating application, surface preparation, and the coating application with I guess an outside third is challenging the low bid culture. Obviously, surface preparation is in steel coatings. Surface preparation is 80+% of the root failure analysis when you have a premature failure in coatings. 80% of the time or more, it's typically the surface preparation is the root cause of the failure. And in coating application, contiguous films, inspection and getting contiguous film plays in a valuable part into long-term performance. I think the outside portion of the outside third would be challenging the low bid culture. I think there are a few states, few entities that do some creative bid considerations where they throw out maybe they throw out the low and the high and look at a nominal bid number and then put parameters around that for awarding. I think it buys you some benefit into looking at contractors that they're actually bidding the actual work instead of bidding the competition, and I think that'll help play into a longer service life.
Okay, thank you very much. Before I throw this out to anybody in the audience to comment on this, do any of the other panel members want to comment? I can tell you, to my left over here are the real experts in coatings, and to my right over here are the people that have to manage these projects. And they may have a different viewpoint of what they think is important, because sometimes they have to sell these things. So would Sarah or Rex, would one of you like to comment?
I would agree with Derek that surface prep is key to getting a good coating application. Another piece from a DOT standpoint is looking at inspection and oversight of contractors that are applying the coatings. And part of it is being able to instruct our inspectors on what to look for, because a lot of, within the DOT, we don't have a lot of coatings expertise. And so making sure that our inspectors have the knowledge and the abilities to be able to appropriately inspect the surface preparation and the coating application.
Thank you, excellent points. I didn't want to draw her attention away. She's got very sharp ears. Do any of the panel members want to lay in to this issue or weigh in on this one, or should we throw it out to the audience?
To second what Sarah said, in Texas, I think we recognize that this is such a unique application, and there are some things we tried to educate our inspection staff on. With painting, it really came down to this is so unique that we sort of gave up. And We very successfully, I'd say, gotten third-party inspection, recognizing that for what we spend on recoating steel, it better go right because we spend a fortune on it. And so Rick, during his presentation, mentioned Johnny and Tom. Tom Schwartz was part of the NCHRP. They oversee third-party inspection. So whenever we do a big steel rehab projects, we make sure that everybody knows that third-party inspection that the districts don't have to pay for is available, because otherwise the quality is really going to suffer. So it's important for us to have that third-party inspection there constantly.
In the training manual, they didn't talk about non-visible contaminants. And in the last presentation, they didn't talk about non-visual standards either. So I think that's something I've discovered when I go visit bridges, that there's high levels of sulfates or chloride ions. I think that should be included more. I'll quietly email you guys. That's all.
What are some of the successful QA/QC practices aimed at ensuring expected performance for steel bridge coating projects? And what are some of the pitfalls inhibiting expected performance? Paul, I think I'm going to throw this one at you over here, largely because you were very involved when you were in Florida in QA/QC practices.
Successful QA practices aimed at ensuring expected performance for steel bridge coating projects. Actually, we went through at least what I think are critical. You know what, I'm going to back up and say kudos to Texas. I like the way you guys are doing the third-party inspection with your own personnel. But going back to the question now is successful QA/QC practices aimed at ensuring expected performance for steel bridge coating projects. Qualified, certified inspectors. You know, the Scantor recommendations, that was one of them. You got to have skilled inspectors and skilled QC personnel. So from the contractor side, I would encourage every agency to take full advantage of the NACE and SSPC certifications. It doesn't mean you're going to get the best QC manager out there. It doesn't mean you're going to get a well-seasoned bridge inspector or QA inspector. But it does mean at least that you've got somebody that's passed a class, has the intellect to pass the class, and is on their way. So, you know, I think training is the very first step in QA/QC. After that, I mean, I have personally been on some of FDOT's projects where the inspectors are not paying attention. You've got to have enough third-party oversight to make sure that the people you're hiring to do the inspection are doing the job they're supposed to be doing. They're not just signing off on reports and passing them along. Pitfalls, inhibiting expected performance. You know, one thing, it's kind of a double-edged sword, is these courses from NACE and SSPC. They're 1 week long classes. Person takes 1 week long class, they come out and they're the coatings expert. Not so much. You know, they've got some tools in their bag now, but they've never used them, and that can sometimes lead to pitfalls. Then that's my thoughts on your question, Jeff.
Thank you, Paul. I'm actually going to weigh in a little bit on pitfalls over here. I think that basically if you're going to have a successful QA/QC program, you really need to empower your inspectors, particularly on new projects, new bridge projects. When you coat a bridge, it looks beautiful. The desire is to move on and to accept it. And lots of times, everybody's fatigued. The contractor wants to get off the job. The people managing the project tend to get a little bit lax at the end and just let's put some lipstick on this thing and move forward. This is when you get really bad results. You have to really be diligent, and you don't know about these failed systems until years later sometimes. So it really comes down to basically empowering your inspectors, I think, and also encouraging them to hold the contractors accountable. And the thing is, if you start doing that, your good contractors are going to thrive, and your bad contractors are either going to get better or they're going to basically not be in the business for that much longer than painting anyway.
One of the major pitfalls goes to the specification documents. You know, well-trained inspectors are trained to do the tests, the measurements, and so forth. to verify compliance to the specification. If you've got a bad specification, the inspector can't help you with it. It's an agreement between the contractor and the agency. So the contractor can't, the inspector can't pull you out from a bad specification. The other thing is I think special provisions are underutilized for unique situations. Some of the structures that have certain conditions that are unusual don't get picked up, and so they'll be missing from special provisions. And again, without good documents, the inspectors can't, pull you out from something that's not required of the contractor.
That's an excellent point, and that goes back to the first question I asked, which specifications was one of the key issues that I raised. Mr. Frank Ray, sir.
Yes, one of the things we've been trying to do away with is allowing the contractor's QC personnel to participate in the cleaning and painting operations. You don't want your QC manager to be your superintendent or your foreman because they have conflicting interests. The superintendent foreman get the job done, make money. QC manager get the job done according to the specification. So that's one of the pitfalls that we've seen. And the other one is, wear your glasses, Frank. Oh, part-time inspection. Coatings is unique in that it covers up what you did the day before. And I know that money's tight. It's always tight. So you want to try to maybe send the guy out there on Friday and do dry film thickness measurements. You're not probably going to get a good result from that because you don't know if the contractor painted over rust. You don't know what happened the rest of the week. So highly recommend against the part-time inspection. The other is lumping a bunch of specialty inspector qualifications into one position. Again, the coatings is unique, and there's a lot going on. It's going to keep the inspector busy all the time. You don't want to be pulling him off from the coatings operations and having him measure the width of the traffic stripes or doing slump tests and other things. So you want to let the coatings inspector do his job by not distracting with a bunch of other responsibilities.
I think one of the big things is we've talked, I've heard a lot about inspection, but from being out in the field, I've also worked with a lot of good contractors. And, in some cases, the contractors themselves do have a lot to be brought to the table as far as what they see, what they've done before, what may be more practical. Yeah, you have a specification that's written in stone, but I think, a good contractor should be looked at as also a resource for how to get a project successfully done.
I couldn't agree more. The most important person on any painting job is the contractor. The job is going to be successful or it's going to be a failure depending upon him. And they need to be well qualified. And I like the idea of warranties because I really think it helps the good contractors thrive and the contractors that aren't as good get a little bit better. And I think that there's a lot, they'll bring a lot to the table, and there's been a lot of discussion in the National Bridge Preservation Partnership Coatings Group on just such a, how to engage the contractors a little bit more in terms of even selecting, product if they can basically stand behind it. I don't know when we're going to get there, but having the contractors involved and basically making them part of it is really very, very important to success in coating projects.
Imagine a room like this, the inspector's here, contractor's here, supplier there, having a chit-chat with an app to back up what's being said, and everything just goes nice and hunky-dory later on, an open and frank discussion. See, the problem is we got this disconnect in terms of communication. I got one contractor I'm working with right now, for example. He's about to do a bridge, and he's calling me over and over again, but it's the same information from one contractor to another contractor to another contractor. And the point that I'm making is if I could get all the contractors in our region together to do that, that'd be great. And you've got some core, why not do that regionally here with this initiative? Just a thought.
What are the best strategies to convince owners to pay more Upfront for higher quality steel bridge coating systems to achieve longer service lives. This is a very difficult thing for owners to do, particularly people that are in the trenches. And I want to direct this one to the only director on our panel, Mr. Rex Costley over here, because he is a director, and he probably has to sell these type of things all the time to his bosses, and he probably would have the best understanding of how to get this done.
It doesn't help when my last name is Costly, so. But that's why I got married. My wife thought I had a lot of money. No side joke. I think the benefit was to have somebody else tell you what's wrong with your bridge, and it's like I don't know. I kind of want to put it personal. Even from within your family, if your mom or your dad says, "Hey, you need to take care of yourself," yeah, one ear and out the other. But if some stranger off the street tells you, "Hey, you need to take care of yourself," you kind of listen, from my experience. So you need that third-party consultant, that expertise, to kind of tell you what's wrong with your bridge. But at the same token, too, that, hey, look at the benefit that you can do if you implement some of these strategies. We're not asking for a brand new bridge. We're just asking for some tender loving care, and that can carry you until you want to strategically replace that bridge. It's something pretty simple, but I ask for money almost every day from Graham, Bridge Division, basically that's what it is. There's a lot of mouths to feed in my arena, and I need to kind of spread out that wealth. So I think having that somebody else tell you what's wrong or what can do, what can help, I think that goes a long way.
Thank you. I think a lot of that's very sage advice. One of the things I'd like to point out, and in trying to sell it to senior management, is that when you're dealing with a coatings project, a recoatings project in particular, you got mobilization costs, you got MOT, you got containment, you got disposal costs. You're going to do the service preparation anyway, and if you got a coating system that costs a little bit more, it's peanuts. And I think that basically that's one of the ways that I would try to go about selling it. Mr. Mondor, you have a thought on this?
When a bridge is about to be done, the first thing I do is I get the owner and the contractor on a conference call, and I get them to go to the website. This took me a long time to convince the owner of Term Rust to allow me to do this. But what I've got on that page is all the screw ups, and I walk through them one by one. And I say to the owner and the contractor, the reason you're seeing this photo, this failure, is because this wasn't done. And a lot of times the contractor will say, yeah, but in the specification of what I've just won the bid for, I can't do that properly. And then the owner goes, well, wait a minute. And then they usually ask the question, if they don't do it, what's the consequence? And I'll tell them, if you don't do this, you're going to have a failure at this stage instead of this stage. Choice is yours. And then they start talking to each other. In other words, I put all the ugly, dirty stuff up front on a website so that they can see exactly where the failures are going to be so that they can talk real business. Because it's always this lowest bid stuff. And then once the lowest bid is there, everybody thinks, well, I have to respect that price. Well, wait a minute. If I want added value, maybe I'll be willing to pay a little bit more.
That's all part of changing the low bid culture. The cheapest price is not always the cheapest price long term.
Jeff, I'll second what you said. What we pay in traffic control alone is a nightmare now. We're paying more in traffic control than we are for the actual work in a lot of cases. So it becomes very easy for us to justify the higher material cost because you're exactly right. In the grand scheme, it's pennies. So if we're going to spend $5 million for the less expensive system or $6 million for the more expensive, it becomes very, very easy for us to justify the more expensive. And for that very reason, we are going with better systems and more expensive rehab because we are paying just an absolute fortune on the traffic control and things that have nothing to do with the actual work.
I heard Texas is looking very seriously at metallizing. Is that true? So you're willing to pay the cost for the added benefits down the road?
The added cost to benefit ratio of changing coating systems. Too many people get hung up on price per gallon of coatings when the real fact of the matter is looking at cost per square foot. So when you look at cost per square foot of the coatings materials, you're absolutely right. The surface prep is going to be the same. It's going to be done regardless. So you take out the surface prep, you look at the cost of materials, cost of coatings on a per square foot basis, then that becomes a much more manageable number. And in general terms, on any reasonable sized project, cost of coatings typically runs in the single digit percentages, 5 to 7%. And that's just on a reasonable sized job. You go to these little very, very large jobs, it may be less than that. So for a percent or so increase, you can really, in coatings cost, if you apply an extra percent or two to it, you can really up your game on your materials availability.
I'd like to have a round of applause for all the presenters here: Rich Burgess, Sarah Sundag, sorry if I mispronounced that, Rex Costley, Derek Castle, Paul Vinnick, and for a small but very engaged audience. Thank you very much.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.